this riddle of like, you must now do. Like, what is that? Like, what is that? How do I do that? Where Gandalf's just like, you can do this. And you're like, yes, I can. I'm done. Let's go. To Mordor we go.
To Mordor we go.
Well, welcome to Signs of Life, the show where we find hope in the headlines. My name is Chase. I'm one of your hosts, and I'm joined by Montana and our guest host for a little bit here, Josiah.
What's up?
Yep, and today we're talking about how the Bible encourages us to care about our mental health because it is Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yep.
And, you know, there's a lot of stories, and we thought, okay, we're talking about finding hope in the headlines, and a lot of stories around mental health right now are not very hopeful. But the fact is, like, they're facts, like they're real, like people are struggling. And I feel like we've talked about this before, but the struggle is not diminishing. Like, it continues to build, and that's just kind of the world and the culture that we're in. And so the interesting, I think, perspective that we share, and especially Josiah today, that I'm excited to hear from you about, is talking about mental health, talking about the importance of sharing our emotions, of how counseling and therapy can play a role, but especially like our faith. Like our faith mixed in with that, being people who are part of a church, leaders in church, Josiah being the lead pastor of a church. Like, some people would say that those two worlds don't really mix. Mm-hmm. Like, I think we're getting better about these conversations in the church world, in a faith conversation around mental health and therapy. But still, there's people who would say, no, like, there's faith and then there's the rest of the stuff in life.
Yeah.
When you think about mental health awareness and the month we're talking about it, we're bringing it up, but like mental health awareness, even within a church perspective, like what is it that the church needs to know about mental health?
Well, I mean, the first thing, Jason, the church has not always been good at this, is recognizing that people have mental health issues. Like just like
Simply
recognizing,
put,
just like, okay, depression is real. Mm-hmm. That's not a made up illness that's from the enemy and necessarily always a spiritual warfare. It's like some people will deal with depression. Mm-hmm. People have anxiety and panic disorders. Mm-hmm. People have OCD. People have bipolar. I mean, you just go down the list of depression and anxiety are kind of the sexy ones that everybody talks about. Yeah. But there's a ton of different issues, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, can the church just recognize that it's a thing? Mm-hmm. Like, it's a thing.
Yep.
And I'm telling you, man, we're talking about mental health here, but if the church would just do a better job of like not turning a blind eye and just recognizing a lot of things in this world, like I think we'd be in a better place of influence.
Yeah.
So.
And I think what you said there too, like if Serena was here, she would talk about the difference between anxiety and then like an anxiety disorder.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because this is something I think, like, and I love what you just said, we all experience this. Like, we all experience stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
We don't all have an anxiety disorder. We all will be, experiencing feelings of depression. That doesn't necessarily mean that you are constantly managing your depression, but we are going to feel those things. And I think what's interesting is those are part of who you are. That God actually created those. Like, he created these feelings. He created your emotions. They play a role. Yeah. But sometimes those emotions get much bigger, and that is when we need a little help. Like, we need assistance. And and I think this is the thing. It can come through prayer. You can pray, and God may heal you of something. God can give you the tools. But then sometimes it requires some extra help beyond what you can do on your own. Yeah. And I think learning that, the simple metaphor I would use, like if your bone's hanging out of your arm, you're not probably going to just stop and pray and that's it. Like, you're probably going to pray because you're going to be in a lot of pain, but you're going to go get some help with that. And I think our emotions are just as important. And we're seeing that in the world because emotions are leading people to do things that are severely harmful to their life, to the point of ending their life. Yeah. And so we can't ignore that. And especially within the church, I think we need to honor the creation that we are, that God has made, and be a good steward of those emotions. Don't just ignore them. Don't just push them to the side. Steward well what God has put in you.
Yeah, just like God gave us giftings and he gave us a body and he gave us life and friendships. Like God gave us emotions and feelings as well. And so we take care of all of the things that he's given us. We steward them and we honor him by stewarding what he has given us. And so like he's a God of feelings. He's a God of emotions because he created those emotions. So there's like this spectrum of emotions that we can experience in life, all the way from depression and grief and anxiety and whatever to joy and love and kindness. And God is in all of those things. We can experience God in all of those things. And so when we're talking about, and kind of getting ahead of ourselves here, but when we're talking about either medication or therapy or whatever it is, the goal isn't to not feel a certain emotion. The goal is for you in a healthy way experience the emotions of life, the feelings of life. Just sometimes what happens is you get stuck on one, right? Or like if you're it's the switch, like the switch gets stuck on depression and can't ever turn off, you know? And it's like, that's when you need help.
And I love like how you talked about these sort of seemingly negative emotions and the positive ones, like you got grief and sorrow and depression, anxiety, and you got, joy and happiness and love. Like, but the thing is, like you said, God's in all of it. Like, that's my opinion. I think God is in all of it. And I don't think they're on the surface level, sure, like grief can feel negative, but it has a very positive role in your life. Right. And to me, there's not a good and a bad of those feelings. They're all feelings. They're all emotions. The way that we manage those, the way that we allow those to play a part in how we see the world, how we're experiencing the world, that's what makes it good or bad. Like if you lose someone, it's important to grieve. Right. Like that is very important. And I think any professional would tell you that. Like when you ignore that's when you get in trouble. Right. But when you grieve, there's something you're doing to celebrate the impact that that person or that thing had on you. That's a good thing, even though on the surface level, grief seems negative. It seems bad because it may be tears, it may be sorrow, it may be wanting to lock yourself in a room for a few days, but all of our emotions, they play an important role. And I think about, for me, and I think all three of us especially, like we try to read the Bible and we try to, see these principles in the Bible and apply them to our life in the way that we choose to live. And growing up, the Bible, it was hard. Like for me, I saw it as kind of a list of rules of do's and don'ts, and be like this person when they did this, but don't be like that person when they did that. But really, to me, when we read the Bible, it's a picture of life, and we're similar. We're not all going to be, we're not all King David, but we experience things that King David experienced. And I say David because I look at his life and I look at his writings, and his life's like ours. It's up and it's down. It's good and it's bad. And especially when you read through Psalms, that's when I see, this king that typically you would only want to be seen as this strong, authoritarian figure. But when you read Psalms, like this dude went through it. He had emotions, and I want to read this one passage. This was in Psalms, I believe it was 20 or 30, I think. But listen to these words. He says, because of all my adversaries, I've become a disgrace, especially to my neighbors, and an object of dread to my acquaintances. Those who see me in the street flee from me. I am forgotten like a dead person, out of mind. I'm like a broken vessel, for I've heard the slander of many, terrors on every side. While they took counsel together against me, they schemed to take away my life. Then he says, but as for me, I trust in you, Lord. Like, this is all through Psalms. It's just this constant sorrowful place. Like he says, I lay my head down in Sheol, which is kind of their word for hell. It's like, my life is terrible and everyone's out to get me and I might as well just be dead. Like we feel that, and we've probably said similar things. And to me, I love reading through that because like, okay, here's, according to David's story, a man chosen by God to lead his people, to be the king, to be the highest up in the land, to be successful in all these things. And yet he still took time to feel these emotions, to write them down, and for us to see and read.
I don't think David is any different than anybody else. I think there's like, in my experience, in my opinion, we all feel this huge range of emotions. We all go through these ups and downs. And some people choose to say what they're feeling and articulate it well. And other people choose not to talk about it as much. And neither one's right or wrong. But I look at David and I see like Like he was just a man who experienced everything we all experienced. He just chose to write them down, you know? And
It's literally like his diary
yeah,
out there.
it's like a journal.
And I think that's like how, as Christians, like why Mental Health Awareness Month is important. Like, ideally, it could be every month. You know, we should be talking about this, but this month specifically, like it's highlighting like you are no different for feeling anything that you're feeling, and that doesn't. And I know we say this a lot, like on Signs of Life and in our community, but I don't know if everybody hears it. But it's like you don't have less faith, or like you're not as strong, and it doesn't make you less valuable to God's eyes, or should be in anyone else's eyes if you're like struggling. Which even like mental health doesn't mean talking about mental health. Everybody has mental health, just like everyone has a physical health, and everybody can be doing things to improve their mental health. And it's not like, oh, well, I don't struggle with depression, so I'm not going to be a part of this conversation. That's why it's so important, because like all the news stories that we're hearing is like, oh, I never realized that this person was struggling with it. Like, how you know, that doesn't seem like them. How are they dealing with this? And it's because we think like, oh, I need to hide that part from me. And that's why reading Psalms, and even it's called laments, right? That's the Psalms where David is writing, and he's like angry with God, like crying, God, why have you forsaken me? And all of those points I think are really important, because again, it's like highlighting that the Bible is applicable to us right now. And it's okay if you're thinking like, God must be disappointed, or I'm angry at God because I'm experiencing this.
Yeah.
But
I think that's true. I mean, what you just said about the mental health awareness deal is really good, because what is Mental Health Awareness Month? It is being aware that we all have a mental health,
yeah.
which sounds crazy, and it's like, duh. But I think the problem is we haven't always been there as a society, right? It's like, you have a mental health, so you need to take care of your mental health. So you might be great right now, continue to take care of your mental health. You might be struggling, then you need to get some help with your mental health. But just recognizing you have a mental health, and it's really important that we care for it and we watch for it and watch how it affects us.
So as we talk about that, let's talk about when you are struggling, when you know David's lamenting, when he's finding himself in a hard place, when we are dealing with those things that, like you said, the switch gets stuck and we feel like we can't get out from underneath that rainy cloud. What are some things that we can do? What are some things that you guys have done when you've gotten into those seasons of your life?
I think first it's acknowledging, like you have to be kind of brutally honest with yourself a little bit. And it's first recognizing like, okay, maybe I do need some help. And it's kind of setting that pride down of, you know, I don't have a horrible life, so why am I feeling this way? Or like I should be happy, or people have it worse than me. All of that I think can stem from a sort of prideness, like, oh, I'm not like that. But it's first recognizing like it's okay. That doesn't make you any less of a person if you're struggling. And so you have to be aware of that within yourself, and then it's reaching out to somebody.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, and one thing I've learned is that like everybody's mental health journey is different, right? And so you can't really cookie cut, well, this is my experience, so that's your experience.
Right.
And so I'm always careful to qualify that when I talk about my experience, like this is my experience and my opinion of what I went through, and it may not be your experience, but for me, it came as a surprise for a couple of reasons. I'm dealing with depression, and I've been dealing with depression probably for 10 years. Got diagnosed with clinical depression about 5 years ago, and I take antidepressants to help with that, and I also see a therapist and a doctor. But for me, depression didn't look the way that I thought it was going to look like, so it caught me by surprise. It wasn't, for me, it wasn't I'm going to lay in bed for 7 days a week, and you know. For me, it was a lot of other symptoms, trying to numb out my life, trying to run away from my life, exist without existing, be present without being present, always staying busy, things like that, which I found out was normal, but it's not what I thought it would be. And the second thing was that, like, I thought that it was my life that was the problem. And so it was really hard for me to grasp that I could be experiencing depression, but have this incredible life, you know? And it just doesn't add up. It's like, well, man, I've got this amazing family, an amazing job, and I love my life, yet I'm experiencing depression. And that's when I really just had to have a come to Jesus meeting and really have some therapists and doctors tell me, this has nothing to do with your life. This has everything to do with how your brain's working right now.
Yeah.
So that was, that helped me a lot because I felt a lot of shame around it because I thought, well, I shouldn't be depressed. Like, I shouldn't be experiencing that. But it really had nothing to do with those circumstances.
Yeah, and I think that's so good because I think about my circle of people, and you know, on the surface level, if you're writing the facts down, it's like, yeah, like I have a house and I have kids and I have a car and I have a job and I have food in the pantry. Like all the things you would check off of necessities are there, and so it's like, well, things can't be going wrong because there's plenty of good, and I see plenty of bad everywhere else, and I think that's really good of calling it out and recognizing that it's not that. Like, you know, you can have everything in the world and still be struggling internally, and that's okay. As y'all say that, as you're talking about those things, and you get to that place of, I need to talk to someone about this. You know, I think there's that level of opening up to a friend, opening up to your spouse, opening up to a parent, opening up to a teacher, whoever it might be. But like when you hit that point, or someone says, hey, it's time to see like a professional, it's time to see a therapist, it's time to check out counseling. Like, if y'all don't mind, like sharing that experience, like what did that look like? Why did that work for you? Did it not work for you with someone else? You know, like how did you get into, Josiah, as you said, even 5 years ago, like how did you get into a good routine of getting the right help? And were there some weird, awkward bumps along the way? Did you have to switch things up? You know, Montana, we've talked about this a little bit before too. Yeah. Just, you know, having to find a different person to talk to.
Right. Choosing your therapist is very key, you know, and like just like you would choose a friend, like they have to mesh with you well, personalities have to match, styles have to match. The very first counselor I ever went to I was in high school, and so I was an adolescent, so it was a child like therapist specialist, I guess. And I went in and she was like, all right, well, first her office was like full of all these paintings and pictures, and that was fine. I was just kind of overwhelmed at first. And she brought me over to a sandbox on this little table, you know, like those kid plastic tables?
Oh, yeah.
That's what it was.
Like the turtle ones where you pop the lid off?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And she was like, here's a rake or something, you know, like play in the sand. And I was like, excuse me, I drove here. Like, that should be enough to not play in the sand.
Excuse me, I drove here.
This is weird. So after that session, I was like, Mom, I don't want to go see that girl ever again. And we just went to a different one. Yeah. And then she was great. And so it's just like, there's no shame in your first time at counseling not working out. Mm-hmm. Like, and I think we put a lot of pressure on, like, first, it's really hard to step into the office, to step into your car, to drive to the office, whatever it is, that is a really hard step. And so when you get there, it's kind of like expectations of like, this is a person, a different person than me. And just like anybody else, we're going to maybe not click right away, and that's okay. And this isn't a one-time fix anyways. It's not in then out and your life is better, of course, if only. So, you know, it's okay to find someone else, basically.
That's good. I think about, like, we're talking about counseling and Serena's not here. And it's like, that seems backwards. But I think this is important of, not from a counselor's perspective, from like someone who's going's perspective, because that's most of us. So like Josiah, even as you think about starting your journey of counseling and therapy, did you have expectations, and then were those met, or were you kind of like, nope, it ended up being completely different than what I expected?
Yeah, well, I think I think that most guys, I'll speak for my demographic, most white men in their 30s, evangelical Christians in their 30s, have a hard time admitting that they need to go to a counselor. Part of that is because I think there's this perception that counselors are going to like tell you how to fix your problems, you know, and that's not always the case. And so it's a big deal. It's a big deal to take that step. And that's why if you get matched up with like a bad counselor the first time, you kind of walk away and go, I knew this was stupid. Like, I shouldn't have done this. And that's exactly what happened to me. I sat down with the counselor. The first time I ever sat down with the counselor, she just told me, I was telling her everything I was going through with depression. And she said, well, that's because your relationship with God is broken. Oof. And I was like, okay, you know. And so anyway, long story short, really hurtful. And she was not the person for me. So then I got connected with a counselor that I really liked, and I don't even know if I can explain why. It's just kind of like you said, it's like a friendship. We just connect really well and we talk really well. And yeah, I mean, I thought my preconceived notion was that she was going to tell me how to fix my life, and that's really not what it's about, and it's not the most helpful thing. So what I've learned, again, this is my experience, is that therapy is there for me to verbally process out loud with a professional who knows how to listen and who knows how to get me to ask the right questions and talk about the right things, right? To prompt me to ask questions that maybe I've never asked before. And so very rarely does she say something that's like, groundbreaking, oh my gosh, that changed my life. I mean, she said some great stuff, but a lot of times what it is she just knows, because she's had training, how to ask a question in a certain way that gets me to answer it. And as I'm saying those things out loud, I'm going, oh my goodness, as I'm verbally processing this, that's what I'm seeing as the issue. And so, and I think it's incredibly Christ-like. I mean, I was telling you guys before the show that one of my favorite verses that goes with therapy is when Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane and he goes to Peter and John, his two closest friends, and he says to them, I am sorrowful to the point of death. And obviously it's the night before he's crucified, and it's like, why would Jesus say that? Why would he tell his friends, I am sorrowful to the point of death? And to me, it's like, because you need to get it off his chest. Like, you need to tell somebody. And there's power in telling somebody. And maybe telling them that kind of relieves some of the stress in that moment, you know? But Jesus literally exemplifies vulnerability and transparency and just talking through what he was feeling and his emotions. And a lot of people could read that and go, there's no point of him saying that. But it's like, well, yeah, there was. I mean, that's what friends do. That's what vulnerable, transparent people do, is they tell their friends, this is what I'm experiencing, and there's power in that, you know?
Yeah, I think the biblical word we see for that, it's like confession. It's the power of confession. And, you know, you grow up in the church world like I did, and confessions just tell all the bad things. But, like, even confessing the good things, like, hey, I had a good day. Like, hey, I thought I was going to hit this bump in the road and not take it well, and it actually did really well because my therapist had me work on this, and I, you know, have this tool for how to cope with this thing now. Or, oh, I had this friend that I shared this with, and they knew that I was going to have a bad day coming up, so they bought me lunch and took me out and got me to, you know, kind of break out of my normal routine. Like, that to me is the power in that, is when you, like you're saying, when you let people in. And I feel like so many times, even in previous episodes, we come back to that idea of vulnerability and community and letting people into our world. And it is hard. Like, to me, it's so hard to get over that first hill, whether it's like you're saying, to drive to the office or to make that phone call or whatever. It's so hard to get over that first hill of doing what you know you got to do. But the moment you do, the moment you finally are able to release those things and to say, man, like I need help with this. I'm struggling with this. And it just begins to, like, snowball downhill, and it picks up so much easier. It's just getting that start. It's like, do it. So let me ask you this. We kind of wrap up today. That was very personal. Thank you. About kind of us. How can someone, whether it was someone who actually did this for you, or as you think about supporting your friends, like, how do you support someone as they're going through kind of a mental health crisis? Whether it's an episode of depression, anxiety, or just someone who's starting their journey of counseling and therapy, how as a friend can you best support that person?
I mean, definitely listening more than giving advice, of course. But some of like the key words that I feel like friends have said to me is like things that are really validating. Like if I'm like, you know what, I've been experiencing this little bout of depression. They're like, of course you are. Like it's okay. Like of course you. I don't know. Something about that like lifts all the shame off of when someone's like, yeah. Okay. You know, like, and they're not like, oh, I'm sorry to hear about that, you know, and it makes you feel like, do I have a disease that I'm going to give you? Like, no, it's just like, yeah.
That's so true. I mean, the worst thing you can do is what's the word I'm looking for? Like, basically write off whatever they're feeling,
Right.
you know? It's like make it seem like it's not a big deal.
Right, like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you shouldn't be feeling that way, or there's no reason for you to feel that way.
Gaslight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't gaslight your friends.
Don't gaslight.
Popular word.
Very popular.
And I'm the same way. I mean, the most powerful times or the most impactful things people have said to me when I'm in like the middle of a depression or stress or whatever it is, anxiety, is validating. It's like, yeah, I'm sure you do feel that way. That's a huge deal. Like it makes sense why you feel that way. And then encouraging me and telling me why they think I can get through it. You know, it's like, that's a huge deal. But man, you are such a strong person.
Right.
Like that combination right there to me is magic. It's like, yes, you are feeling that way, and you should be feeling that way because it's a big deal. But man, I believe in you.
But yeah, exactly. Just like calling something out of their character that you know as a friend, you see that, like, I know this is going to help you. So let me say it. Like, you are a strong person, and I don't know.
I like big butts.
I don't.
You're dealing with this. Listen.
I'm sorry.
Derailed us. Listen, what you said is, yeah, of course you're dealing with that, but like a big butt, like, but you can get through this because you're strong.
I can't believe you said
I
that.
like big butts. No, but really, like, I heard someone say that one time, and I had the same reaction. Like, did you just say that? But it's true. It's like, make a big butt though. Put it there and say, "But I can do this.
Yeah.
Or
you are strong. You
and.
have friends.
Yeah.
You've got people alongside of you." Sorry, I didn't.
It's all right.
That's
man.
all right. There it is.
I think like the worst thing you can do is diminish your feelings or try to compare what they're going through with something you've gone through.
That is the worst.
It's like, oh yeah, well I know exactly how it feels because here's what I went through. It's
Right.
like, dude, this isn't about you.
And
right
you can
now,
have
so.
empathy in the
Yeah.
same way, like, yes, I felt. I think I can understand what you're feeling, but I'm not saying like,
Yeah.
you know, I felt
Make it about
exactly
the other
what you
person.
felt, and now help me.
Well, you think that's bad. Let me tell you what I went through. You know, it's like, oh my gosh,
Bad.
dude. So
And
we
it's
do
hard
that-
to not do that because
Yeah.
we're
It is,
so
yeah.
selfish. It's like,
We are.
well, let me tell you about my story real quick. Let me slide that in.
Let me-
but yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh. Okay, well, as we wrap up today's episode, our new little segment here,
butts.
this or that, like big butts. I thought that was great. This or that. And based on what we talked about today, here it is. Who would you rather have as your therapist, Yoda or Gandalf?
Easy. Yoda.
What is it?
Yoda.
Yoda.
Why?
Well, one, today, recording day is May the 4th, so duh.
Star Wars Day.
So it's Star Wars Day.
Force be with you. Why Yoda, though?
Well, really, it's because I don't know anything about Gandalf. I have seen Lord of the Rings. I just don't
Do you
care
like
for
Lord
it.
of the
No.
Rings?
I mean, it's just whatever.
Is it whatever,
It's.
Montana?
I think it's pretty boring.
So you want a tiny little weird alien who speaks in backwards
That's so
sentences
judgmental.
to be your... I'm just asking, because I'm definitely picking Gandalf.
Well, he's really wise. It's like Yoda's the wisest
Jedi?
Jedi of all the lands.
Maybe. I don't know. Gandalf
yeah.
he's a wizard, number one. But all
He's
these
a-
personalities
that's
of
number one.
people,
He's a wizard.
you know, that we see in the Lord of the Rings story and world, he helps all of them, and he says the right things, and he asks the right questions, and he helps guide them. He's a very good guide. Where Yoda, I
Yoda
feel
does
like
that
you have to go through all these like, what's the word I'm looking for? Riddles. He's like giving you riddles, and you're like, what do you mean?
Kinda like-
do this with that? Like, what does that even mean? And you got to kind of figure it out on your own.
Kind of like parables when Jesus is
No,
telling.
they're very
a
different.
parable.
The parables were making sense. It's like, that's a story. Thank you.
okay.
This riddle of like, you must now do. Like, what is that? Like, what is that? How do I do that? Where Gandalf's just like, you can do this. You're like, yes, I can. I'm done. Let's go. To Mordor we go.
To Mordor we go.
Josiah, you have to answer that.
Well, Chase just gave a very compelling argument
Did
for
he?
Gandalf. So
Do we?
yeah, that's
That was
all
the
he-
compelling
that's-
argument that he made.
I just don't want to
Get
go
better,
to
you must. I mean, like, okay, Yoda,
that's-
thanks,
I
bro.
guess Gandalf, man, because I don't want to do my way through therapy.
All right.
Gandalf wins. Thank you. Sorry, Montana. Loser.
May the 4th.
Loser! You should feel very depressed right now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I should.
Why are you so dumb? You
course
should
I
talk to
do.
someone about that. Well, thank you so
has
much
gone
for
off the
joining us today. I like big butts. Don't forget. Share this episode with somebody. And make sure you're following Signs of Life on social media. We'd love to hear from you and ask you these questions. We want to know what you would think, what you would say, who you would pick. But anyway, like, subscribe, share with someone, and we'll see you guys next time.